All right, welcome back to the Growth Hack Franchise Marketing Unleashed. I'm Marcus Slater, founder of AdCloud. And today's episode is for all the franchise owners who have ever thought, okay, cool, Marcus, what would you do if this was your location? Today, I'm answering that. No fluff, no hypotheticals, just real talk. If I was in your shoes running a franchise, launching in a new market, trying to fill my books, I'm walking you through exactly what I'd focus on, where I'd spend my money and investment, what I'd automate, and what I'd skip entirely. And joining me, as always, is our creative director, Mackenzie. So let's get into it.
Marcus, you've got the keys. Your name's on the lease. Now what? You're officially a franchise owner day one. What's the first marketing move that you're making before the oh no moment hits?
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest thing that hopefully you and I negotiated a really good opening clause to where I'm not being charged too much until the location actually opens. But pre-launch investment is everything. Even before like you've hired staff. Now you should be focusing on staffing right now, but your advertising investment is the very first thing that you should be outside of like your build out. Really, you should already know who you're going to use, what agency you're going to do it. Please don't DIY that. It's such a hard thing to launch and do and run for 3 months out. You need to know what agency you're gonna use, what your strategy is, what your intro offer, and you need to have 2 to 3 intro offer backups in case intro offer 1 doesn't work. Now, if you're buying a franchise, there's gonna be a little bit of assistance in what's worked in the past, etcetera, but don't bank on those things. For me, I would never bank on those things and say, okay, great. Yeah, corporate said the $59 offer is what you should go with because every market is slightly different. The demographic is different. And so you need to make sure that you have all of those things looped in. The only benefit that you can do is garner as much client or potential client data as you can to be able to remarket to once your doors, which you're probably about a week open or a week out from taking bookings. And that is where I think most people drop the ball. But I would double down and spend a lot. If you are planning to spend $2,000 a month in marketing investment from the time that you're opening, I would be planning to spend at least $6,000 a month for the first 90 days. You should be extremely heavy on the front end because you're never going to be as popular as you are during that announcement period post open because people get excited about new things and then they forget. Because there's always another new thing. Businesses open all the time. And so that's where I would focus in driving those. You're not going to really focus on Google much at that point, but meta ads, Instagram, maybe TikTok, if your industry is big there or there's a lot of traffic there, finding ways to do that. And then begin planning on your campaign post open. Just because you open, don't just send one text and one email and think this is going to be it. We're going to have 1,000 people standing at the door. While it's important that you go and say, okay, I'm going to spend $18,000 over 90 days to drive, and we're going to have 2,000 leads. And then we see so often like people get to opening week and they send one text, maybe two texts and two emails. And they're like, oh, this fell flat. No one came, no one remembered. You have to remember, you've been talking about this for 90 days. Some have forgotten, but at least you have their information. And so this is your chance to re educate them, re excite them. And you should have a 90-day follow up campaign for those 90-day leads already in place and ready to go day one. And so that's where I would come in and do that. Your staffing, look, it's going to cost you a little extra, but to start finding the right staff, filtering through the bad staff, they can always get better at the task at hand. If you're in the beauty world, whatever that is, but really spending time focused on selling, helping them to become the best sellers possible, because that's going to make or break, especially if you're a membership model. I see it all the time. There is great staff that can perform a service really well, but they couldn't sell water to someone in a desert because no one has focused on it. And it's not a natural, for most people, it's not a natural thing. So being a great salesperson takes a lot of trial and error and understanding your tone of voice and confidence. And I would argue you should spend 70% on how to sell and 30% on how to produce the product or service. Because you're going to become better at that service out of repetition. There's going to be clients, there's going to be those things. There's only going to be so many selling opportunities. But day one, when people are coming in, you haven't had those opportunities come in. So run mock trials, like sample, like you're the customer. How do we pitch it? And really provide that feedback to your staff and say, okay, yeah, this was great. That is the first thing I would do because if they're not able to upsell product, sell memberships, etc., it's going to be really hard to hit break even. And when the big bills start coming in, I have staffing, I have rent, I have utilities, all that I have refunds, all of those things. You don't wanna be trying to figure it out at that point, being like, "I don't know, maybe it's the sales." Or the first thing everyone will say is, "It's the leads," because it's the easiest thing to blame. There's no personal responsibility outside of the agency. Most of the time, it's not the leads, it's the follow-up process and or your team internally who just can't sell, and that's not a knock to them, it's that they've not been provided the proper education and training to be able to sell and pitch it the right way. And there are numerous ways to pitch a product or membership. But that's really my focal point would be on continuing to build out and nurture out. You have to focus on staffing because staffing can make or break you. It takes so long to hire, and then when you lose someone, then you have to start over and try to find someone who's good again. So for me, I would always have someone in my back pocket hiring. A friend of mine does that. They own 4 studios, and they're constantly hiring. Just nature of the business. There's going to be a churn, so they want to make sure that they have people in the Rolodex that have already interviewed, that maybe they're just holding the spot. But when that spot opens, they reach out and say, "Hey, I know it wasn't the right time 2 months ago, but if you're still available, we'd love to have you." Whereas most wait until that happens, and then they're like, "Oh, now we have to hire." So now, even if you think about that, let's say you get the ads out, and then it's a week of filtering through resumes, and it's another week of interviews, and then you finally find your, top 3. Of those top 3, 2 are just gonna fall off the earth, right? That's just because people are flaky. So now you're down to 1. Now they have to go through training, now they need sales training or another 2. So you're 6 to 8 weeks of not producing revenue from that specific staff member spot because you waited until the ball dropped rather than being prepared. And so, especially if you're in like the service industry where like you're talking about flipping beds and like in and out, that's a big loss of revenue. That can cost you $50,000 just because you weren't prepared. So for me, it would be marketing strategy at the top, pre-open, open, making sure that we're consistently getting out there in front of people, continuing to invest heavy throughout the first year, and then making sure that the staff is that there is a good Rolodex of people that can come in and fill the gaps as we grow, and then figuring out how do we continue to coach and incentivize the staff? Most people, like, just assume their staff is great. Most people become too friendly with the staff and just naturally have that assumption that, "Oh, well, it's okay." You have to set meters. Humans, like, we're competitive in nature, or we want to have those incentives. We want the opportunity for growth, and so building that out into your brand or your franchise and saying, "Hey, if you sell 20 memberships this month, we're gonna give you X," right? That's a bonus, maybe it's, I don't know, a gift card, I don't know, I'm gonna take you to dinner, whatever that may be. If you sell X amount in product sales, we're gonna get like those are the things that make a difference, not only to your bottom line, but I think also in how much your staff appreciates and wants to come into work and wants to be there and feels valued and feels like they are also giving back. I think also like sharing numbers when you're in service-based industry, like being open, sharing like revenue generated by certain staff, like staff, whatever that is, because you need them to feel like they are a part of something bigger, not just a hamster on a wheel. And when they can see, like, "Oh, man, I helped us get past break even," praise them for that. And then for the ones who aren't maybe producing that high, say, "Hey, like, you can do that too, but let's figure out what's happening. Is it coaching? Are you just not comfortable?" It is a constant thing. And that's why I always say to franchise owners, like, that is a full-time job plus some. Coaching, nurturing, managing the staff You are crazy. I would be crazy if you think that you can do all of that and DIY your marketing or DIY your ops and do it's just not it's not feasible, it's not possible, and if you're like, "Yeah, but Facebook says you can just boost a post," or like, "Google says it's automated," those things aren't gonna work, and you're not gonna have anyone coming in the studio, but you hopefully you are really good as you coming into a franchise at managing people. Now, I've come across many owners who are not. It is not their forte, and that's not a knock to them. That's just not where you're great at. If that's the case, then you need to look at hiring a studio manager who is good at that and has high level of energy that can come in and get everyone excited for the day, etc. But you need to understand where your strengths are and where your weaknesses are, but it's really about the staffing, and when you drive all the marketing in, if you have great staff that can convert, then you're really ready.
So I know you've seen a lot of people open new franchises. I know you've seen lots of launches. We probably couldn't even count how many you've seen. What is the first mistake that you would skip if it were your business? Like the one thing that everyone wants to rush into, what would you calmly just not do?
There's probably a lot of corporate entities are gonna hate me a little bit for this, but following the corporate checklist to a T. I think you have to figure out what is going to work in your area. I think this is healthy for corporate entities to understand that they are providing a blueprint, right? Like this is a blueprint for you, and that doesn't necessarily mean that you have to do it verbatim. You can swerve a little bit. You can do some of those things, and that I think is it, and we have many that are like, they come in, they're type A, they are gonna follow that checklist no matter what. They are terrified to veer off a little bit, but then we have others that come in, and some of them have run businesses in the past, and they're like, "Okay, I'm open. I understand the concept of testing. We should test it here. Just because it didn't work in Alabama doesn't mean it won't work in Minnesota or on the West Coast or East Coast." And so being open and testing everything until you fine tune what works for your location is what is best to do. Now, make sure you follow the important checklist. But when it comes to especially, I think I'm talking just a little bit more to the marketing side. You have to be open to testing and throwing everything against the wall until you see what sticks for your location, your demographic, instead of just following this, because most corporate blueprints are based out of their pilot studios. So if that pilot studio is up north and they're like, "The majority of our clientele is women between the age of 35 and 55," right? And you're in Texas, that may or may not be true for you. And so you need to start testing all those demographics and figure out what's going to work for your location.
Can you walk us through what your automation setup would look like? What's running behind the scenes while you pretend that you're not stressed? If you had like your top automations to make your life easier, what's going to get built first?
For me, in that initial launch phase, everything would be pre-built and automated. There wouldn't be anything other than like agency running ads or whoever's running from the time that someone submits a lead form, they're going into a hopper, and that's normally Facebook's Lead Center or a Google Sheet, which is auto push. That's not manual. A Google Sheet or CRM or your booking software, it's automated into it and they're held. And then you have a delay date and say, okay, we're opening on June 12th. On 1 week before, I want to start outreach. Uh, So if you use a platform like Zapier, now that 1 week outreach, it's going to start to trickle that education content. And it's going to automate that through an email platform, SMS. Obviously, we have AI integrated, so that would be my first go ahead. So we're going to port that information into our AI experience, and they're going to start to receive that SMS outreach, the email outreach, and be able to start to book appointments or ask questions. And then, of course, if they book, that's all automated into the platform. But your entire follow up and engagement sequence should be completely automated. There's no piece of it that I would do manually ever because you always want it to be the same. It's hard to understand data if you're like, well, I've got a couple hours today. I'm going to drop some leads over here to run through. Oh, I've got some a couple hours on a Friday. Without it being automated, you need to see trends over time. Is it time of day? Is it this? Is it that? Those things are like super easy to automate and make it far more efficient so that you can go and focus on the ads or focus on the staff. But that entire thing, I would say, like it should be built out. You shouldn't be building that out when you open. You should have it built out at least for the next 9 months and what that content is going to be, how it's going to flow. You're going to send an educational email about services and memberships at least once a month, but that's automated, and an SMS maybe twice a month about new offers, whatever that is. Like automate all of those things. Now you can go back in and change the automation once you get some learnings and you understand what people are connecting with. But if you were to, I don't know, I shouldn't use that, but if you drop your phone and computer in the ocean for some odd reason because you had them down there, like it's still going to run. It's not reliant on you manually doing it at 9 a.m. every day. And so that is that really, I think that's most people overthink it, but it's very simple. You just say like automate all of your outreach. Now, if you want to do phone calls, obviously that's something that you can automate if you're gonna get a calling service, for sure. But if you're wanting to do them in studio, then that is going to be a manual task, and you're gonna have to set auto reminders and tasks, but you can automate those tasks. So you can even use Zapier to say, "Hey, based on this list that comes through on day 3 after the SMS has gone out, create a task on my calendar to call Jane Doe." Attach their phone number to the Google Calendar, and so now, okay, it says 9:30, you've got to call Jane Doe. Right? So there are still ways to automate some of those things and make sure they land on your calendar. But again, calling is just one of those manual things that some do, some don't, some find beneficial. I always sway on the side of I don't answer anyone that calls me that's not in my phone book. But there's nothing in marketing that you realistically can't automate other than your actual advertising.
Okay, so it's your card on the line and it's time to run ads. Where's the money going? Give us the no fluff version. How are you splitting your ad budget and what platforms are getting paid?
Well, pre-launch is going to be Meta because you want mass saturation. Post open, post open, you're going to split and test. Split it down the middle. Uh, take your opinion out of it and split the budget. If you're going to spend 2,000, spend 1,000 on Meta, 1,000 on Google. Track it for 30 days and see which one's performing the best. Hopefully, both are performing well, and you can just continue to increase. But if it's slanted, then I'm going to move to Meta potentially or Google based on that. I think there's variances that everyone has to understand. Everyone always comes to me as, well, okay, Google's performing better. Shouldn't we just put all the budget there? So sure, you could, but Google, while it has a higher conversion rate, it doesn't have as many leads because of the search intent. It's pay per click. It's like all of those things. So it's naturally a lower. So for example, social, you might get, if you spend $1,000, let's say you get 200 leads. Google, if you go over and you spend $1,000, you might get 50 leads. Now they might be converting at a higher rate, but that offset is not really gonna offset Meta. You have to balance that out and figure out, okay, is lead conversion the most important thing? Maybe, maybe not. Was Google driving more membership purchases or more people actually showing up and in the door and not no showing? Because that will really tell you where the long-term benefit is in the platform. 9 times out of 10, it doesn't come down to one platform. It comes that you have to spend on both. Now you can weigh that budget and say, we're going to spend 70% Google, 30% social for sure. You can do that. You're always constantly waiting in this line of recurrence, but really dividing and just testing and figuring out where it is. And that's what I would do. I would go in, split the budget, test it, see what's working, what's driving the most return. Here's the truth. Owning a franchise doesn't mean you need to follow 37 corporate checklists or post on every platform just to feel productive. You don't need to do more. You need to do what works. If I were in your spot, I'd be laser focused on visibility, follow up, and making sure every marketing dollar had a job. And I'd automate everything I could so my time went to what actually moves the business forward. Thanks for tuning in to the Growth Hack Franchise Marketing Unleashed. If this gave you clarity or at least gave you permission to delete 12 things off your to-do list, hit follow, leave a review, and send it to someone who just opened and is already overwhelmed. We'll catch you next week.